Yeah, here it is. All right, you've started the recording?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this meeting is now in session and is being held by electronic communications using Microsoft Teams due to the COVID-19 pandemic emergency.
Thank you.
And I guess
Okay, so we got 4 agenda items as we always do. And there'll be some conversations towards the end sort of on new topics that we want to carry forward. As far as policy revisions that are coming up, the main one that's coming up is J13 revision, which is the physical interventions for students in crisis, which is coming up for next month in July. And then we've got the very large bundle that's going for that July, August timeframe adoption that we all know about.
Yep.
And then the counseling crisis management policy we need to talk about, and that's one of our topics for later this afternoon, later in our meeting. So about when that's going to be scheduled and how that proceeds forward. So there's not been any radical changes to the schedule we published other than the counseling crisis management. So next thing is to feedback on existing policies. These are primarily things related to there's a financial section, there's the instructional on grouping, there's the staff electronic acceptable use policy, thing on internet privacy, which relates to the use of our public website and the cookies and gathering information on people from the public website, and then a couple of items related to juvenile court, school and police relations. We shall proceed from there. Any feedback? Let's start with the first one, which is going to be financial management revenue sharing.
I don't have anything on the policy, but I do have one thing on the PIP. Provision G. Also, should this be the right numbering for it? I don't know if this should be the right numbering for it when you go back and do the organization piece. The provision G that the agreement operates on an annual basis, annually renewed unless either the school board or county take action to the contrary. Should we put in some sort of parameters for notice? Like, if there's going to be a change, we should know about the 6 months in advance, like that.
Okay.
That might need to be approved by the county, but I think that just establishing a guardrail on please don't tell us 2 weeks before the budget starts is probably wise.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. Under the provisions, yeah, the provisions, the lettering is the old style. This has not been updated to the new style.
Got it. Yeah, I was
so
like,
this
is old and weird, and why is it an A? I don't get it, but whatever.
This is because it was before the style guide was developed. So once it's done, once we've got the revised policy, they'll be cleaned up. Okay, so that provision notification in the provisions. Okay, I've taken that a note. Okay, thank you for the feedback.
Cool. Anything from you, Reed, on that one?
not me, thanks.
Okay. Just for the record, we did receive an email from David Priddy with comments on 2 policies. So that information will be forwarded on to the appropriate people.
And I don't think we have any, I haven't seen anything else from the rest of our colleagues, so I think we're good on that one.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
Next one will be, next one is financial management, additional county revenue.
Nothing for me.
Nothing here.
It's 2 sentences. It seems fine.
Policy as it should be. 2 sentences. All right. Next one is I-8.1 grouping.
I think we need to, so going to the policy itself, it encourages diversity within classes. What do we mean by diversity here? I think what they were trying to say at the time was non-homogeneous grouping, essentially, that it's students of different ability levels and students with IEPs, non-students with IEPs, things like that. But let's just be clear, if we're trying to say non-homogeneous grouping within classes, then let's say that. as opposed to trying saying it weirdly. And David made a comment here about tracking, and I think that we want to spell that out, like what we actually mean by tracking. Because it's a jargon and we use it in the education world all the time, but that doesn't mean that it's clear to any lay person who's reading the policy. And the other thing was I know that in the style guide, we've come up with a better way of doing quotes, because this quote just feels, of the Code of Virginia for the twins situation, just feels super awkward. And it's just a formatting thing, so we can figure out how to make that a little bit clean. That would be better.
Yeah, okay. Or this is the existing format, right? So, yeah, we do better than that.
Yeah, we normally do like in accordance with the Code of Virginia by doing blah 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 blah, and then like you basically take the entire thing and just like change the action, like
Sure.
change the noun on it. It's fine.
Yep.
Actually, I have no eating anymore, so I'm going to come on video so I can actually talk to you. And that is all I've got on this.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we have good precedence for the quote stuff. We did that in a number of policies. We just literally quote the code.
And it's essentially verbatim. It's just that you change who the actor is. It's like the district will do blah 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 blah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Reed, anything to add to that one?
No.
Cool.
Okay. All right, so that one's good. Next one up. We're moving right along here. I shouldn't say anything. Electronic technology acceptable use.
This one was
this is for students.
Yeah, so this one I had a lot of comments of just making sure that it aligns with the code of conduct. The code of conduct is going to be done first, so we'll be able to then match them together, which will be fine. But just making sure that they jive is helpful.
So a question for you. So this is, when you're talking about that, you're not talking about specific consequences, right? You're just talking about in general, right? Yeah. Yes. So the philosophy that sits behind this one, because I know a lot about this one because I helped write it. The basic philosophy is all the rules apply to technology too.
Yes, that is
okay. So
that's
almost try to get all.
Yeah.
That's what we tried to. I originally proposed that this would be a one-sentence policy. All the rules apply to technology too, but we didn't manage to pull that off. But we tried to do that.
I mean, like essentially, like what we're saying in the entire discipline paragraph. Like, that's fine.
Yes.
I have a question on line 427. It says student who gain access to inappropriate content or become aware of a security or hardware problem shall immediately notify an administrator. How? When? On what timeline? What happens then? All of those questions. Maybe it's something to go into a PIP, but those are all like tactical questions that I had no idea like what the answers are, and they're not spelled out.
Okay.
And then I had a question about privacy on line 61 and 62. It's except for participation in activities considered to be in the public arena. How is that defined? Is that something in code? Is that something in like common legal parlance? Like, who gets to decide what a public arena is and it's not?
So that's usually the public performance concept. Usually that comes from school and community relations, helps to divide what those things are. But the general concept is locations where you would expect to have a reasonable expectation of privacy.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Exactly. So that's generally what it is. So my house, my classroom, I have a reasonable expectation of privacy. People can't walk in. If I'm sitting there at a football game, anybody can walk in. I have no expectations of privacy. So that's.
If we could just put that reference here, or if it's actually like, if there's a reference to it in school and community relations, then let's just go back to it, like activities to be in the public arena as defined in blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, breadcrumbs back over. Okay, that makes sense. And that's in section 51. Okay, let me type those notes.
Yep. Let me know when you're ready for the next one.
Okay.
And this will be a nice little, this next one's a nice little predicament for the policy subcommittee or the policy review team to figure out how we want to address this. But line 65 and 66 talk about photographing, audio recording, photographing, or video recording is strictly prohibited in locker rooms, dressing rooms, health offices, and restrooms. And yet teenage girls take selfies in the bathroom all the time. So what is the solution to address that? Like, is this something that needs to be addressed in the code of conduct? Is this something that needs to be like outlined specifically here? I don't because this is it's something that happens. I just know that it happens. We see teenagers taking selfies in the bathroom all the time.
What, sorry, Christina, you're breaking up. What's happening in the locker room or the bathrooms?
I'm using teenage girls as a generalization, but it's like really any sort of child will frequently stand in a mirror and take selfies of themselves and their friends.
Selfies. Okay.
Selfies in the bathrooms. This is a frequent occurrence, and it's technically prohibited according to the Electronic Technologies Acceptable Use.
Well, because behind you there could be somebody else in your photo.
Exactly.
But it's not you, right? So and they have a right to expectation of privacy in the bathroom.
Correct.
So,
and at the same time, we also don't want to be like India obligated to then follow up every single selfie that's posted on Snapchat or TikTok or on Facebook of teenage girls in the locker room of our schools. Like,
right.
We need to figure out what the right balance is here. So a topic of conversation that the policy review team can kind of figure out where we want to have a medium.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Yeah,
that's a good meaty question.
Because we need to have something about it in the policy. There needs to be an expectation, a reasonable expectation of privacy that has to be maintained for students. And also, I don't want us to write a policy that technically we would need to enforce every single day, and stalking children's social media. That's not a good use of our time.
Right, exactly. And how can this be enforced, and how are we enforce it?
And just being realistic about what teenagers do in bathrooms.
Yes, they do.
Yep.
Things we don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've got an entire public school system designed to change teenagers' behavior.
Precisely.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, how are you? I apologize. I was on with Barbara, so forgive me. I sent you a text.
No problem.
Sorry, I've been flat out of it. I see the text. Finishing up with Barbara 5 minutes ago.
There we go. A question for information services, and this is not necessarily in the policy, but I was provoked by the policy, so feel free to bring it up with the review team, or Brian, if you want to note this for later thinking. We say in the policy that all users shall keep their passwords confidential. Do we have single sign-on options? Like, do we want to enforce that? Is that a thing we want to do in the future, that you will always use single sign-on? Because we have My Access as an option, and I know that we use some of those things for the students too.
Right. So I can answer your question basically, right? Even if you have single sign-on, you still have to know what your password is because you've got to log into that system.
Yes, but
right, so it's not. So it really doesn't change that
fair point.
per se. The second thing is that not all systems can handle that. Right, there are many systems which will not work with single sign-on. They require their own usernames and passwords.
Okay.
So they just do.
Well, maybe there might be merit to adding a one-line mention of single sign-on there too.
Okay, we'll pass that suggestion on.
Well, is this something? Are we stepping into a problem where, what happens when somebody shares their password?
Right. So in this situation, the policy doesn't get into specific consequences carefully because we didn't want that. That's a discipline policy, right? And so we just draw breadcrumbs to the discipline policy and say, hey, that's a matter of discipline if you're not following the rules. This is mostly read about teaching people best practices.
Yeah.
Right? You're not supposed to bring your passport. So this is really about behavior change and teaching kids digital citizenship, right? And this is in general common sense things for us as adults that kids just need to be taught. So that's what a lot of the policy
You'd be
is.
surprised how common sense this is not. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that the vast bulk of this, really, the policy is, if it apply, all the rules apply to technology too.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, take care of your device. Don't share your password. Don't share private information of other people. Those are more specific to technology. People don't think about, right?
Yeah.
Necessarily.
Yeah.
Taking a selfie, may have somebody in the background, and now you're violating their privacy. That's not okay, right? So it's about sort of teaching around that, because we use this as the center of our digital citizenship curriculum. The kids read it or variations of it. They read it every year. There's a curriculum around that. So it's sort of the foundation of the digital citizenship. Is a key part of what this document's for.
Awesome. Love it. Love it.
But there isn't an implied consequence or something like that attached to this. If you don't share your password, then XYZ will happen to you.
Right. All the consequences and we're trying to do our very best in that all of the consequences in all of the policies point back to the discipline policy. They point back to specific workforce policies. They just say shall be, according to, handled according to this other policy. Because we don't, what we want to do then is when a discipline practice changes, we're going to go through restorative, right? Practices. We don't want to have to go change a bunch of different policies, right? You just change discipline one and it takes care of that. So that's why it's just breadcrumbs. That's why that specific things aren't here.
Okay, I got it.
That's the why. Because
Yeah.
to allow us the agility to change our discipline processes without having to go back and change 1,000 policies.
Yeah, because especially with technology and practices, not necessarily specifically related to one, technology or set of technologies, are changing all the time. And
That's right. Right, exactly. They're constantly changing. So this has got to be, even though we update this every 2 years, it has to be proof against really fast changes. And we don't want to put ourselves in boxes. So it tends to be relatively generic.
Yeah, I mean, look at CDs. CDs came in and they lasted 15 years or something, and they went out. And now you probably
like the record to show that I still have CDs that I listen to in an actual CD player.
Oh, wow.
I also have a record player because I'm a weirdo, and I have a record player and a CD player, and I listen to actual music on the thing that it was designed to put on.
In another 5 years, maybe nobody will know what a selfie is anymore.
Yeah. Yep. Hey.
Yeah, I don't think that's
Wouldn't be the worst thing.
I don't think people, teenagers, taking pictures of themselves is ever going to end.
Yeah.
So sorry. It's like they can't look in the mirror anymore. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I think you're right.
That was never going to go away. All right. That's just my 2 cents. Okay. Thank you much for that feedback. So we've got through the password. We got through the whole question about the pictures and stuff. Okay.
Yep.
Feedback on this one?
Way down to liability. I mean, this is a policy, so it's a school board policy, but it was fascinating to me that the school board is not responsible for any of these things, but not the district. So it might.
So you guys are the embodiment of the district in this situation.
In this situation? Okay, then that's fine. I just was
in all situations.
True.
Okay. Or should it be changed by public schools? We can look at that. We'll have to talk to legal about that.
I mean, check with legal. Might be worth it. It might be like the school board or Arlington Public Schools.
Yeah. I know you said it embodies it, Matt, but it does read kind of weird to me too.
Yeah. Even if it legally is fine, it might just be better for clarity because again, to our that layperson reader. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. It used to be, everything used to say school board,
Mhm.
and we're now shifting it more over to Arlington Public Schools for improved readability.
Yeah.
So that's a good candidate change here. So I've taken that note. That makes a lot of sense.
And that's everything I have on the policy.
Okay.
I just had one, I think 2 things on the PIP.
Okay.
In line 2, just updating that to the chief academic officer to align with the new operating or the new org chart. It's the assistant superintendent of instruction. Which is not even
Line 3.
now that I think of it. And then there was a question. Oh no, this is down in the recovery costs for loss, damage to issued devices. This is a little bit further down.
Okay.
And nothing else on that first PIP board.
Okay. Okay, so line 3 is PIP is the org chart change. Thank you. Okay.
Everything else seemed fine. And then on PIP 2, it was interesting that it didn't include like incorrect subscriptions or like non-approved subscriptions. I don't know how we would logistically do that, and I don't know how we currently. I mean, on the iPads, do students have to log in with their own personal Apple ID and like connect to credit card in order to download additional things? I don't think they do. But then if they're
Can't.
downloading things that then we have to pay for, like how is that? I don't know.
Yeah, they can't. So that's a really interesting question, Christina. They can't. So a student can't obligate the school system for anything. So if a student was to download a personal app, they can't even log into a personal app. But let's suppose that they were to use their Safari to access a website that charges for content. All right, that would still be.
In that case, they would have to use, like that would be very clear because then they would have to put in a credit card in order to pay for it.
Yeah, no, the students don't have direct access to the App Store.
Okay.
And they don't have access to credit card. We use what's called managed Apple IDs. So it's a special set of Apple IDs managed by the school system with restrictions on them. So those are not the same as the public, improve privacy, everything else.
That for everything I just said, that we're all good.
Okay.
And that's the stuff that I didn't quite understand. And I'm like, wait, but what if they spend something and we don't want them spending that money?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so this one's here. This is interesting. This one's here. Reed knows the backstory on this one, but because there was a situation, we said we weren't going to charge, and we had kids who were like throwing them across the room, looking at the teacher saying, "Oh, you can't do anything about that. You can't charge for it."
What?
Yeah, not very much, but
Yeah.
more than 0. So we spent a lot. So Reed pushed pretty hard for this, and I thought I was pretty happy. Then people grumbled about it. I said, "Wait a minute, got some great ammunition." But we were very careful to talk about, very careful about that concept, willful or negligent, right? So you purposely did it, or you didn't follow the rules, right? So so nobody's going to complain if 2 kids are walking in the hall and they bump into each other, they're carrying them correctly, somebody's backpack falls off and it breaks. Okay, nobody's worried about that.
No,
Frisbee.
you were like walking and you tripped and you dropped it. And you're that's not willful or negligent. You tripped. It's fine.
That's right. We spent a lot of time on this one. I was pretty happy the way that all came out, actually.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of feedback on this one. It looks great.
The sticky part is the lost, because when the parent says it was lost, do they mean that the kid, like put it under the tree while he went over to the pickup game or, something, and then walked home and forgot about it when they realized they came back and it wasn't there? Is that lost? Because that's negligent to me.
That's correct.
Yeah.
But anyway, we had the parents sign a thing saying they're basically, financially responsible for it.
Yeah.
Now, my question is, how much of that has been enforced?
So that's a really interesting question, Reed. There's been a little bit, but very little. The point of this is we would never want to ever have to collect. Nobody ever wants to have to do that.
Yeah.
The point here is to put the teeth behind it so that kids are taking better care of their devices. So that's why we look at this. The schools do. There are some collections through some schools. Some money has come in. but it's not a major revenue source, and it's really not designed to be that. It's designed to be a deterrent instead, so the kids
Yeah.
take better care.
Yeah, right.
Totally.
Yeah, and we do think the breakage is down because of it, right? We do think it's effective in we're not hearing situations of the kids frisbeed across the room anymore. Those stories are gone. So I think it's solved its primary purpose of just having kids take better care of their stuff, right?
Yeah.
Not perfect, but it's helped. So
It's like, at least don't throw it. Like, if you fall, that's fine, but don't throw it. Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Cool. Okay. Then I think we can keep going.
excellent. Internet privacy is next, K2.5.
Yeah, this one seemed fine.
Yeah, and just to be clear, this is a matter of the public website. Things like cookies
Mm-hmm.
on the public website. This is nothing to do with APS student records at all,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So this is owned by School and Community Relations and management of the public website.
Yep. This is just as an order piece, but it says that exact same point that you just raised in line 17, and that might need to be raised up a little bit further higher so that it's very clear that we do not collect any student information through our public website. All student information is collected through blah, 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 blah. And have those two sentences kind of move up in this just to make it super clear. Like, we're not collecting student information on the public website. It's not a thing.
I might put it in the policy.
It's not a bad idea, actually. This policy is short.
Yeah, that's where I put it. APS is it's a policy. We do not collect student information through public website. We're done.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
It
So
already
we
says
might-
that we shall not collect unnecessary personal information by means of its website. So just adding it, shall not collect any student information via its website. It does that all through the authenticating systems.
Or staff.
Yep, love it. Love it. Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, yeah. I'm just skimming through this to see if there's anything else that I found, and I don't think it is.
Okay.
I don't know why there's a contact information section on this one. I don't think we do that on regular ones or on other policies or PIPs. Sense for that, yeah.
Yeah, there's a reason for that because this backs the public website, and you're required, I believe, under law
Mm-hmm.
for transparency about where people should outreach if they believe information is being done, and we have it on the website, but you want to have it in policy too, in governance. So that's why that's there.
Cool.
Okay, but typically it's not comments or questions. It's if you believe it's happening or something like that.
I have an issue.
Yes. Right.
Yep.
Okay. Next.
Next one. This I believe that this is coming straight out of code, right? If it's coming
I'm
straight,
assuming so.
that's what prints the code.
It sure looks like it.
Yeah, and I don't love the language of students are best served. It's because I would argue that students are poorly served by the juvenile justice system in general. But I think we can find some different wording for that doesn't necessarily lead with students are best served. Especially if this is just coming from code. If it's just like Arlington Public Schools cooperates with the juvenile justice system for the code. Then that's fine.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
The
You have a PIP.
Yeah, the PIP, I read through this and I didn't find anything, but I also don't know the logistics behind this. I think that if whoever's writing this, just making sure that this is actually how the system works now, I think would be great.
Yeah, that will be normally caught as
Yeah.
part of the process itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is just the very, very beginning of the revision process here.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
And school and police relations, we're gonna have to rewrite this entire one.
Needs to be completely written.
Complete rewrite.
So let me ask about that. What's the relationship between that and the MOU that I assume is also going to see some kind of, rewriting given the new superintendent's recommendations, et cetera?
This is at the beginning of the process right now. So it'll take about 6 months for us to get all the way through the process. The MOU is also up for its annual review in January. So, Brian, if I'm guessing right, the timing of this is all intentional. That we would vote on the 24th, make the decision to either move forward or not move forward, and then that would trigger rewriting this policy and the MOU, or like renegotiating the MOU and rewriting this policy simultaneously. Am I putting those things together correctly?
Yeah, the June 24th would be the kickstart for both of those items. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
It's almost like we planned it.
I mean,
It's almost like we said, let's hold on to this policy until we're done with this whole MOU research that Brian's doing this year, and then we can start it going forward, which is why a policy which was last updated in 2003 wasn't being touched.
Yep.
Because we wanted to wait until this was done. So it was 100%. Yeah, yes.
okay.
One of the things that
Hang-
Brian's-
All right, I'm still confused. So June 24th is going to be the kickoff of the new APS, APD relationship or SRO relationship or whatever we're going to call it.
Yep.
Pursuant to approving the superintendent's recommendations. And what did you say, Brian? The 24th is also going to be the kickoff for.
I would say the 24th is a kickoff for this policy, kickoff for the MOU. Also just a kickoff because, of course, when we gave the recommendation, some of the things we went into detail on, some we did not. There's a lot of minutia that we still have to work through. So we have to really work through a lot. Rita said to you the other night when I was leaving out that, this is novel, meaning that we have a lot of stuff to do on this. So I would say, I would just add on just really working through the minutia and activities that we mentioned Thursday night. I would say it kicks off 3 things is what I say.
All right, my basic question is, do we need 3 things that all, dance around the same thing? Or can they be combined into 2 things or 1 thing or something? Or is that something we're really not going to know until we look at the potential for revising the policy?
Yeah. Well, we've always had this conversation since I've been attending these meetings on MOUs, right? So, is the MOUs, is that under the board's purview or is that the superintendent's purview? And the reason I ask that question is because if MOUs are under the superintendent's purview and then the policy is on the board's purview, I would say we would need 2.
Yeah.
But Matt, do you know the answer to that question?
An MOU and a policy serve slightly different purposes.
Yeah.
Technically,
Yeah,
the MOU should be subservient to the policy, right? So we write the policy and then the MOU is developed in accordance with the policy.
So you need both.
You do need.
I think you need both, and I think the policy, but they have to be written concurrently because they have to be 100% in line with each other,
okay.
Right? They may be very much the same language, but they also have different audiences, right? Policy's primary, big part of policy is our families and our community, where MOUs tend to be more internal working documents. Those are very different target audiences as well. So they serve different purposes also. Even if the content is 90% the same.
I think the other thing is that in this particular case, the MOU is going to outline, and it's going to be the vehicle for the negotiation between us and ACPD. Just to define, and we're going to be co-creating what this is going to look like, and that'll be the vehicle for the co-creation. The policy then needs to, we'll vote on the recommendation on the 24th, which will provide kind of a straw person framework.
Mm-hmm.
The MOU is then the detailed negotiation vehicle, but then the policy provides the framework that then encompasses that detailed negotiation vehicle that gets updated on a periodic basis as we go forward. Does that make
Right,
sense? Think about
it does. I think the reality is that technically the MOU would be a PIP if it wasn't between us and somebody else.
You're
But
right.
because it's a shared, because it's a shared document. It's not a
Yeah.
PIP. It's an MOU. But the policy this is still the same relationship, right? The policy, and then you've got, it's not PIP, it's an MOU, but it's the same. It's all the details about the implementation.
Yep, that's totally right. That's totally right.
So that makes sense, right? So it's essentially a PIP that we're just going to both sign, but we're going to call it an MOU.
Okay. We're gonna. It's a PIP that's going to be on an external facing document. Like
that's right.
Yeah.
Right.
But with that being the
You can
case,
attach the.
so with that being the case, are we still saying the MOU first and the PIP? I mean, the MOU.
You got to write at the same time. You got to write them at the same time.
Same time.
Yeah.
I do. I think
Right.
you write them at the same time, but I think that I still think that the MOU is going to be a little bit more detailed and it's going to be a little bit more variable as you're fleshing out the details.
Yeah.
The MOU is going to move pretty significantly in the process of negotiation. The policy will then need to coincide with that.
Right, but the policy is generally basic guiding principles. So I'm going to guess that the vast majority of what the board's going to agree to now is going to be the foundation of your policy.
Yeah.
So the general agreements. These are our big picture agreements, and then the MOUs and negotiation, the details around those things. So
that makes sense.
I think that makes sense. So the policy becomes a little shorter, big picture stuff. And Brian, I can help you with all that if you go forward. But I guess so can Christina, obviously. But it's going to be. I think we're going to be fine here. Okay.
Cool.
Is that it? All righty.
Like that.
Thank you. All right. So technically we're supposed to go through old business before new business, but I have an urgent sense about a piece of new business I want to talk to you about first, which is the retirement of those policies, because that's holding up something else. Okay. So something went in the Friday letter this last Friday, and then it would have been attached for today's agenda as well. And I had alluded to this previously, but I want to sort of paint the picture here for all of you about what's happening and what happened, and determine what you as a subcommittee recommend we as staff do to bring this to resolution, because we are sort of in a conundrum here, and we want to be sure that the staff and the board are all on the same page going forward on this, whatever that is. Right? Mm-hmm. We all got to be on the same page. Yep. So basically, let me sort of give you the Cliffs Notes of what happened. This is summarized in the memo that was that's up on board docs. So in 2019, over the essentially 2018-19 school year, the emergency manager, Zach Pope, went through a process to do a massive revision and reorganization of our emergency policies, right? And as part of that, he condensed a whole bunch of stuff, or I think it was four separate policies into one policy with about 8 PIPs, okay? All sort of aligned with emergency best practices, right? So he did all that consolidation process, and he presented that at the June 18th, 2019 board meeting. Mm-hmm. Right? And it was his intent at that point in time that those other policies, the E2, the E2.1, E2.2, and E10.31 be retired. Okay. Because his concept was we're consolidating all of this content into this one policy. But that was earlier in the PRT process. And so he did not present crossed out versions of the policies. So his redlined existing policies were not have strike through on them because we hadn't had that standard procedure in place then. This is why we have that standard procedure now, because it's caused some confusion. He had great comments about where the content was, but they were bigger picture. He used the term combined and condensed, but he didn't specifically use the term we intend to retire these policies. We didn't use a specific language. So there was some stuff that was sort of a process that needed to be improved, that have been improved now. We're much tighter about that. But in the end, there was some question about whether or not, when the board approved this via consent, that they really had intended to retire those policies. So here's where it gets interesting. Then in December, it came forward again Zach said, a motion asked for a motion to retire the policies. The motion went forward, and then there was a counter motion to table the first motion,
Okay.
which of course you can't do in Robert's Rules of Order. That was a complete violation because you're only supposed to do that for emergency situations. This was not
Okay.
that. But regardless, they tabled the motion, and COVID happened.
Yeah.
Okay, then COVID happened.
Yeah.
All right. Meanwhile, and so normally that'd be pretty easy. Meanwhile, the crisis counseling management policy, many staff members felt that this was a valuable document. And so they went through, and we've been doing revisions on that. And because there was so much turnover in staff, Julia left, all the rest of this sort of stuff, we didn't catch that it had intended to be retired. So now we've gone through this process. We've gone through public comment. We've received extensive feedback from ASAC and groups, like a 5-page memo from ASAC on the revisions of the crisis counseling management policy, which the board may or may not have already retired. So we are sitting here saying, how would you like us to proceed? So right now it's all stopped. That's why counseling crisis management has been pulled for upcoming board agendas. We were ready to proceed forward with it, but we need your sense here about what's the path forward for resolution.
Is the content of E2, E2.1, and E2.2 actually covered in the new policy?
I did not personally analyze that. According to the person who did the revisions, yes. In fact, their policies, when they were marked for revision and deletion, he specifically said this is covered in this, this is covered in this.
Okay.
But we could re-audit that if that's what you wanted us to do.
I'm separating these in my own head because there's like there's the ease problem, and then there's the crisis.
I think that's a wise separation, Christina. Yes.
Because I think that the E policies, it's just a matter of like, are they actually, is the content actually covered? If so, cool. Like, move that forward. The counseling, oh my God, I'm going to say this wrong every single time. Counseling crisis management one, I'm very conflicted on because we just went through this process of the edits. ASAC had a very visceral reaction to it. And so I think that we should aim to retire it eventually.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's feedback that came in this round that should be incorporated into what the new policy became. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Yeah.
So in other words, I think hearing you say, let's take the collective feedback that we have received.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go through E2, E2.1, E2.2, validate that the content has already been updated in the other policy. It's all there. Take the feedback on crisis counseling management, look at the existing policy, saying, do we need to make some changes to that? So your recommendation essentially is to do over.
I think that's where I'm at. What do you think?
That's an easy answer. I don't know. I don't have a good opinion at the moment. A do-over would presumably, take care of all of the loose ends and the hiccups and everything else. What would a do-over entail, Matt?
Essentially, you'd have to put the current emergency policy back out for its 6-month revision process.
Yeah.
You just adopted it 2 years ago. You have to start over again. So it would go through the standard 6-month process, right? Yeah. Which is a process that's well understood. And the other thing is that's one policy with a bunch of PIPs, right? So most of the content's in the PIPs, not in the policy.
Mhm.
So we don't have to put the PIPs through public comment. So that's the other thing that, right, so that's the other thing we could do, is you could say, okay, we want you guys to go through, scrub the PIPs, be sure that all that content's in the PIPs, be sure that the PIPs reflect the feedback that came under crisis counseling management, and all that sort of stuff. If you need to create a new PIP, you need to create a new PIP, whatever that is, go back, get the PIPs cleaned up again, and then we wouldn't have to do the policy revision, just clean up the PIPs based on all that.
I think that's probably the happy medium that can address this, and we probably will have to vote again. Melanie, you're the expert on this one, but will we have to vote again on consent to officially retire the policies? Or do we not need to vote on it again?
I do think you need to vote on it.
Okay,
Because the vote was never taken.
the vote was.
No, it was for consent the first time. This is such a hot mess from Robert's Rules of Order. I was flipping through my book and I was going, oh my goodness.
What did you do?
Through consent, and we didn't act on it, and then they tabled a motion specifically prohibited from doing that sort of stuff to cut off conversation. You're not supposed to do that. You can't. It's only for emergency situations. So anyway, I said Robert's Rules of Order field day with this one. Field day.
Len, yeah. So then we're gonna have to vote.
You're gonna have to vote.
We're gonna have to vote on consent to just retire them once they are in the PIPs. Like once they're in the PIPs.
Correct. So we have a process already where we inform the board about PIPs.
Yeah.
Right. So it could just be. Are you talking to us? I think he's talking to somebody else. So you could have the consent agenda, right? Or actually private discussion. So the superintendent. So the chair could say the superintendent has informed me has informed me that approved these PIPs, and then you could have a motion in your actions to say, because he's done this, we're going to retire these policies, right?
And then we can just have a quick statement of like, this is where we are, like, and that we're fixing this. Fine.
Does that work, Melanie?
Yeah, I think that's a good approach.
Okay, so that's the process. Is the intention is that I'm going to go over this again. We're going to be looking at primarily at the PIPs associated with that are associated with the crisis. We're going to confirm that all of the content was moved over, or if it was struck purposefully. All of the feedback related to crisis management is reflected in the PIPs. That may require adding a PIP. It may require revising a PIP, whatever that is. But we're just going to revise those PIPs according to all that. When we're ready with those revised PIPs, we'll bring them forward. At that point, the board can take action and retire the policies.
I have a slightly different. I just connected this to the idea of moving content through amendment. If there's anything, let's do exactly what you just said. But the board agrees with moving content through amendment. So if there's anything that ends up needing to go into the policy, because counseling crisis management is currently in the policy revision process, we can have that be the vehicle for the vote, and we can move content through amendment from pricing counseling management. I'm going to say it wrong every time, it'll be fine. We can move the policy from there to where it needs to go.
Yes.
And vote to retire. And the vote can be amend and retire, and that can solve this problem.
Oh, that's beautiful. Very, very clean, Christina. Excellent.
Yeah.
I really like that. Right. So that gives us a fair avenue to move content from the policy over that's necessary and put it in policy if that's required.
Correct.
Right. Through the amendment process. Okay. I like that.
The stuff that's like in the PIPs, the stuff for the E's that can likely just be in the PIPs, that should be relatively easy. If there's something that needs to go into the security policy that is in from the E's, we would have to do that like when the policy comes up, because there's no vehicle there that aligns. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
So
Nerdy, I love this.
No, I think you're. No, you can do it ease. You can move the room minutes over there too. But we're not going to go through that. We're not going to go through that.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna need to do that. It's only with counseling crisis management that there might be content that needs to come back to the policy.
I think we're going to be okay.
Sweet. We have a plan.
We have a good plan. Reed, you go with that plan?
Yep, I'm good.
Okay,
Great.
good. All right, I'll sell it to the staff. but no, I think they're going to be okay with it. I think ASAC's going to be okay with it too, because it's respectful to the feedback that they've already provided.
Yeah.
Right, so we've got a mechanism that's respectful to feedback of everybody that's come through, a path forward that's agile, that doesn't require revamping the entire other structures or everything else. So it's to be agile and quick,
I think
quickish, but is respectful to the work that we've got. So
EDM quick.
the work's been substantially done. So it's really how long it's going to take them to make the appropriate changes, right?
Yeah.
That's really all staff. It's really sort of a staff time. The process itself is relatively fast.
Great.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's a good resolution. Very good resolution.
And that also gets to the answer about the moving content through amendment. So we are all set on that too.
Okay, so we're okay with that concept. We're going to move content through the amendment.
Yep, totally okay.
Right. That's just really nice. Thank you very much. That's just a really great thing to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to talk about board pips at all now, Christina, or you want to table that one?
Let's table that one because I am going to have a hard stop in 3 minutes.
So my only last question is, what's our schedule going to be? We need to talk about the schedule for the summer.
I am working like normal with the exception of the week of the 4th of July. Everything else is just like normal. What about you, Reed?
Well, with, greatly reduced activity on the APS side, I'm also working the summer, but greatly reduced activity. I mean, I don't see any reason we can't meet every day.
Can I point out that it is possible that we will be going back to regular meeting processes, which would mean you'd have to hold these meetings in person, not virtually.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Ouch. Yeah. So if that's the case, because both Christina and I have day jobs, maybe we should think about moving them to a time that, works for the staff, but works for us also. So I'm thinking maybe early morning, maybe lunchtime, maybe, late afternoon.
I think if we do an early morning, I think that would be ideal because then we can do an early morning and then go on with the rest of the day.
Okay.
As opposed to having the interruption in the middle of the day where there's transit and then coming back and yada, yada, yada.
Okay. I can likely do that in most cases, most days.
Yeah.
So Matt, how much meeting time are you anticipating over the summer?
There probably won't be very much. We've done a pretty good job. You've noticed there's been a lot of policies coming for feedback on the existing policies. I've front loaded that a little bit. So we're not going to be asking for that much of those things over the course of the summer purposefully.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been front loaded for y'all. Then we've got the big bundle that's coming through.
Yeah.
But in theory, that doesn't come back to the subcommittee, right? Because it just goes to the PRT. The subcommittee doesn't see those again. So the only thing would be other draft policies that are coming in the fall. So it should be pretty light load, Read. The one thing that we might do is we're going to be looking at some of the processes a little bit. As a PRT, generally we like the overall outcomes, but memberships, and we have to tweak a little bit of sort of stuff. So, but I think it's going to be fairly simple as well. So the realities of saying all that, we probably don't need to meet that much. We don't have that much content.
So are you talking like the same thing, roughly an hour once every 2 weeks, or
max? I would probably be less than that, I would guess. You'd probably go up like once a month.
Okay. Well, my usual, paradigm is schedule the meeting, and it's easier to cancel at the last
Mhm.
minute than try and find a time, at the last,
Yes, I agree with you completely.
when people aren't, expecting to have that on their calendar.
Okay.
So if you want to try and, find a day and a time, early morning that works for you and the staff, we'll at least put that on the calendar starting what? Not the week of 4th of July. Christina's gone. So starting the week of July 12th, right?
Okay.
I mean, we're going to meet once more on this regular cycle on the 21st.
Right. So we take a little break, and then we'll take a little break for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Right? In the week of July. So Melanie will work on that. Okay.
Yeah. And then, so we'll meet again the week of the 12th, or at least we'll schedule a meeting the week of the 12th.
Okay. That makes sense to me. Okay. That sounds good.
Right,
When
Melanie,
you say early morning, what is early morning to you, Reed?
8.
Whatever you guys want. I can do whatever.
Melanie, what's the reason we have to meet in person versus virtual?
Because this is an official committee of the board, and once the emergency declaration is over, we cannot do virtual meetings.
Yeah, we don't have the authority of the emergency declarations anymore,
I have to cover.
to meet virtually. But I have not heard, although I anticipate it's coming up, whenever, the governor is going to,
I heard
declare that the emergency is over.
And part of our emergency resolution is built on the county's resolution. And I've heard that the county is going back to in-person meetings after June 12th. So I'm assuming that means they are ending their emergency resolution at that point. But I don't have all the details, so I'm just giving the warning that it's very possible.
Well, thank you. No, that was
Yeah.
helpful.
Does the county have situations like this where there are 2 county board members, in a more or less county board subcommittee?
I do not know for sure. I think they do, but I'm not positive.
Okay. All right. But thank you. I need to hop to another.
Okay. All right. Matt and Melanie, can you stay on on a different topic after we close out this?
Yeah. So why don't you go ahead and close the meeting, Reed?
Okay. So this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. For Melanie to finish the recording. Shut the recording off.
I just hit the button and it should shut off any second now. I don't know why it's not.